There was a single mom was raising her two sons, young boys, who were challenging at the very least. Oh, sorry. See? Yes. Now the children can go. I got to adjust to changes here. I'm in a rut. Okay. Children, go have fun and go learn and come back when we're ready to sing ourselves out of here. And I was talking about children, right? Two boys. Single mom, two boys. Challenging little boys, difficult little boys. And she had talked to different people about them, how to work with them, and had others talk to the boys, and wasn't making any headway. So she went to see the pastor. Now, he was not really great with children, but she thought he might be able to get through to these boys, and she asked him if he would talk to them. Sure, he would. So he came over and sat down in the living room, and she sent the first little boy, the younger of the two, in. He didn't want to go. Went in, sat down. Pastor just sat there and looked at him for a while, and he was having a really hard time sitting still. He had a hard time anyway, and that was really hard. And then he said, "Where is God?" And the little guy didn't know what to say. And he was getting really agitated, and he couldn't come up with anything to say, and he was looking around. And there's this long pause, and then the pastor again said a little bit more loudly, "Where is God?" And the little boy is just about freaking out. He doesn't have anything to say. He doesn't know what to say. He doesn't know what to do. And there's this long pause. And suddenly the pastor, who's a rather large man, stands up and points his finger at him and says, "Where is God?" And the little boy screams, jumps out of his chair, shoots up the stairs up to his room, scoots under his bed, hiding. His older brother sees him run past, hears the noise, and comes running in. "What's the matter? What happened? What's wrong?" And his little brother under the bed says, "Oh man, we're in big trouble. Apparently God has gone missing. And they think we had something to do with it." I know I told that story before, but I love the story. And the question that it brings is, has God gone missing? Or is it that we just miss God? And if it's the latter, then we are participating in a time-honored tradition. In the story today, Jesus is talking with his disciples, and for the second time in Mark's gospel, he tells them what is going to happen when they arrive in Jerusalem. That he will be arrested and tried and killed, and 3 days later he'll rise again. Now, it's good always to remember that Mark is writing about 40 years after those events have happened. So he's not predicting the future. He's exploring those past events and the meaning of them for his community, for the early church that isn't really even much of a church yet. It's still within the Jewish family. Notice in the text then what the disciples do in response, or maybe what they don't. What do they not do? It says. They do not understand what Jesus is saying, and they do not ask any questions because they're afraid. Is that not a curious thing? Why would Jesus' disciples be afraid to ask questions? Now, in a scene that happens just before this, in between those two sections that I read you, Jesus, Peter, James, and John have just come down off the mountain of the Transfiguration, and they walk into this sort of a chaotic scene. There's a man who has a son who is ill. The diagnosis is that he's possessed by a devil. He has convulsions. And the man has asked these other disciples of Jesus if they would heal him, and they have tried and they failed. And there's an argument going on between the disciples and some of the scribes. And we don't know what the nature of the argument is. It's probably, early, mid-first century trash talk. See, we knew you couldn't do anything. We knew this was all fake, smoke and mirrors. You guys, you got nothing going. Oh, yeah, back and forth, that sort of thing. Jesus comes into this, and he's just steamed. He says, what is wrong with you? How long is it going to take before it gets through to you, before you understand what's going on here? All you have to do is open the door to God. This is the work of God, not your work. Don't you have any trust at all in God? And Jesus then heals this boy, demonizes him, I guess you could say. And then they get on their way to Capernaum, which is home, or home base. And when they arrive there, Jesus wants to know what it is that they are talking about on the way. And they, again, are silent. Earlier on, they don't ask any questions. They don't respond. They're afraid. Now they don't respond to Jesus' inquiry. Why are they afraid, do you think? Is it because they fear that he's going to chew them out again publicly like he just did before? Is it perhaps they're afraid because they know, they do understand what he's saying, what he's telling them, and they don't really want to accept it? They want to turn away because the implications are that if what he says is going to happen to him in Jerusalem, then could very well happen to them. In any event, on their way, they're discussing things, and they get to Capernaum, and they come into the house, and Jesus asks them, what was it that you were arguing about on the way here? And the word that is translated in the New Revised Standard Version as ask is maybe better translated interrogate. Jesus pushes them. He's angry with them. This is not a happy time. He's not happy with his fellow travelers. There's tension in the air. And he wants to know what they were arguing, what they were debating, even though apparently he knows because they don't tell him. And yet he gets it. He overheard them. He understands. Maybe he knows. And Mark says they were arguing about who was the greatest. Now, in the past, I generally heard that as they're arguing amongst themselves. Who amongst us is the greatest? I am the greatest. No, I am, in terms of disciples of Jesus. But that really makes no sense given the painful lesson that they've just had in how not great they truly are as disciples, right? So, what are they arguing about, do you suppose? Perhaps it's the subject of greatness and what makes a great leader, since they're following this Jesus. Does a great leader allow himself to be arrested? Does he walk into a trap, allow himself to be hauled in and strung up without a fight? Is that great leadership? Does a great leader allow himself to be taken down without pushing back, especially when he has the power to do that? What's so great about Jesus? He could have had things come out a different way, couldn't he? He could have pushed back. He could have asserted himself. He could have brought about some other ending to this thing if he had wanted to. Why does he act this way? And if he had done differently, then, speaking of the early church, we wouldn't all be sitting here waiting for him to return, wondering if and when he's going to, and if he does, what difference it's going to make. And as John, I think, says later on in that century, maybe he's already here. The return has already happened. Has it changed anything? What's so great about Jesus? Where is he leading us? To what? To what kind of world? Where is the God that he's trying to reveal to us? And what difference does that God make? In response to their concern about greatness, their debate, and in his anger, Jesus lifts up two images connected with greatness. One is a servant, and the other a child. A servant or a slave and a child, neither of which have any prestige, any power, any authority, any ability to do anything, really of little value at all. Who in their right mind would put themselves in the place of a child or a servant in this world? What is Jesus saying? Where is God in this, and what does God want? In 1997, Damon Thibodeau was arrested, charged with murder, convicted, and sent to death row, sent to die in the Louisiana State Prison at Angola. He was 23 years old. He was on death row for 15 years. During that time, late in the time that he served, a group of attorneys came across some information that he hadn't committed the crime, and some of these attorneys were part of the Byron Fredrickson law firm in Minneapolis. And they went to work, and they eventually got him released from prison in 2012. Because of the connection with the Twin Cities, Damon came to Minneapolis, to Minnesota, to start his new life after release from prison after 15 years on death row, eventually settling in Texas where his family was. And he began a career as a truck driver. Now, as a child, Damon had suffered all kinds of abuse, including sexual abuse perpetrated by several male members of his family. So you could say that a good part of his life was a hellish experience, and that could have possessed him and dominated him. But it didn't. Steve Kaplan, one of the Minneapolis attorneys who's now retired, who helped work to free Damon, said he had this profoundly positive impact on everyone who had the privilege of knowing him. John Konek, another of Damon's attorneys, said, life had knocked him down so many times in so many ways. He had every reason to be angry and bitter. Instead, those who knew him marveled at his resilience and his optimism. A kind and gentle soul with an easy smile, he was as gracious as he was grateful. Put that together, the experience and the person. How does that happen? Damon hauled freight cross-country for 9 years. And you can imagine, having been locked up as long as he was now, to be free and traveling all over the country and seeing the country and encountering all kinds of people and getting paid to do it. It was a wonderful time. And it came through. People experienced that in him. Well, on August 10th, he pulled into Jacksonville, Florida with a load of freight, and he felt terrible. He got the freight unloaded, and then he went to the hospital, and he collapsed in the emergency room. He was admitted with COVID, and then pneumonia. And it was doing its work. He was fighting back, and the treatment was working, and he was coming through this. And on September 2nd, right? Yeah. He was on the verge of being released. He had done so well. He was seemingly healthy and strong enough. He called his brother David from the hospital saying, bro, I'm about ready to get out of this place and come home. And David remembered those were almost the exact words that he heard from Damon as he was leaving Angola, the prison, in September 9 years earlier. And so he was excited and anticipating his big brother's return. Several hours later, he got a call from the hospital. that Damon's lungs had collapsed and his heart had stopped. And they had been working for 45 minutes to try to resuscitate him, and there was no response. Should they continue or should they stop? And David told them to stop. David had been in Afghanistan, and he'd seen plenty of times how after a serious injury and a heart stoppage, resuscitation after a while, it's just, they're not coming back. Damon Thibodeau died on September 2nd, 2021. He was 47 years old. 47. 16 of those years behind bars for a crime he did not commit. And how many years sort of locked in the pain, the horror of the abuse that he'd suffered as a child. And now to die of this disease after just 9 years. It's so unfair, it's so wrong, it's heartbreaking. And yet it happens. Where is God in such a story? I read that story in last Sunday's paper, and it just stuck with me all week long, and I couldn't shake it, and I still can't. And the picture of Damon in the paper, the smile with a Minnesota Vikings cap on, it's just so sweet. Another story this week, different but as haunting to me and unnecessary, the dolphin slaughter in the Faroe Islands. Apparently it's a tradition there. They herd a pod of pilot whales and dolphins into a bay, and they enclose it, and then they go out, and one by one they stab these creatures to death. And this time they herded so many dolphins. There were hundreds and hundreds of them, and it took a long time to kill them all. They didn't. They finally let a couple hundred go. Why? There was more slaughter, more meat than they could use. It was unnecessary. It was egregious. Why? Where is God in that? And why do I repeat such stories here? I mean, that's a real downer, right? You hadn't heard it already. You feel terrible. Well, back to that original question. Where is God when such things happen in this world as they do all the time? Where is God? Where is God? In the text, Jesus responds to the disciples' talk about greatness, and he says, whoever welcomes a little child in my name, whoever becomes a servant of others, a slave, whoever goes to the back of the bus who are forced to sit back there, whoever goes to the reservation and hangs out with the people who have lost their land and live in poverty, whoever takes their place with those whose voices have been taken away, who have no power, who have no prestige, those who do that take their place with me. And in doing that, they take their place with the one who sent me. Where is God in those stories? In those events? So one more story, really short. The end of the Afghan war, the violence and the ugliness continues, and people are leaving there, some of them to find safety, to find a place to live, to find a place where they can have a decent life. And some are coming here. And so there's this church that I know of that has decided that it's going to sponsor one of those families right here. This church has decided to do that so that some family from that torn apart place can come here, hopefully to find security, safety, home, and a future. Where is God then? Here. Right here. In you. Amongst you. Because of you. And others will experience God as a result. Amen.